They might not be ranked, but Rutgers is off to their best start in the past 12 seasons. With an offense scoring 35 points a game, led by a running back ranking in the top 5 nationally, they come to Lincoln to face one of the best run Ds in the entire country. Nebraska started hot too, then injuries and red zone struggles led to a minor setback. But Saturday can change it all. One of these teams is leaving Memorial Stadium with their 5th win and a top 25 ranking going into week 7. So today we'll look at Nebraska's matchup with Rutgers, where they can take advantage, and how they can pull off the win on homecoming weekends. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my Thursday night live stream with Mike from the Night Report. And if you think Raiola has another turnover-free game, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
He's hit and sacked. He's taking a shot downfield, wide open end zone, caught, touchdown.
You asked for more playing time for Emmett Johnson, and after he went for 50 yards on 8 carries, Rule decided to bump him up from the second group with Gabe Ervin to the first with Dowdell and Ramir. I think it made sense to go with their biggest back early on since he was averaging 6 yards a carry and was a real problem to take down, but Emmett's been way better at making guys miss and breaking long runs. So far, Dowdell's got 60 carries for 277, which brings him to a 4.6 average, but Johnson has 174 on only 21, and that doesn't include his 96 receiving yards. He's averaging 8.3 yards a carry and 13.7 a catch. Rule could argue that Dowdell wears the defense out to give Emmett the opportunities to shred him later in the game, but it's starting to feel like part of the reason the run game looked so good early on was because they weren't playing against good defenses. And if there was ever a time to shake things up to see if another back gives you more explosive playability, I'd say it's right now. Both of these teams expected to improve this season, but now that we know this game will decide which one jumps into the rankings, it means a lot more. I don't want to say they're lucky to be undefeated since they had to go on the road and beat Virginia Tech, but Washington gave away that game on Friday night. Just start here. Washington went for over 500 yards of total offense. They didn't turn it over once, and they still only scored 18 points. That trifecta is so rare, it's only happened 3 times in the past 10 years. Now, don't get me wrong, Rutgers still had to capitalize on their opportunities and protect the ball so they could score 21 on offense. But if the Washington kicker hit one of the 2 missed field goals, then the outcome might have been different. Nebraska lucked out last week too, not because the other team shot themselves in the foot, but because they played one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. If that game was against Maryland, Michigan State, Wisconsin, or any team with a competent offense, then Nebraska's a 2-loss team right now. I looked back at the history in this matchup, and since they joined the Big Ten, Rutgers is 0-5 in this game. But wait, there's one interesting trend to look at. Every year, Nebraska's margin of victory gets smaller. In 2014, they won by 18. In 2015, they won by 17. Then it shrunk to 10, then 7. And 2 years ago in Piscataway, they only won by a single point. Rutgers gets closer to beating Nebraska every time they play, so if that trend continues, this is their year to finally get it done. Out of respect for the strength of their team, we're going to start off with the Rutgers offense that ranks 12th nationally in rush yards, averaging almost 240 a game. Kyle Monangai was second team All-Big Ten last year after running for almost 1,300 yards, and after 4 strong games this year, he's on pace to go for almost 1,800. But he's not the only threat. Sam Brown's the backup who averages over 5 yards a carry and looks every bit the starter Monangai is. The 2 deep on the O-line's made up of all juniors and seniors with multiple years of experience, and their strength as a unit is paving holes for their run game. Their QB isn't bad either. Kaliak Manis came over from Minnesota, and he's completing 61% of his passes with only 1 interception on the season. He rarely attempts the deep ball, and in the last 4 games, he's only tried to throw a pass longer than 20 yards in 2 of them, but he's not looking to create explosive plays. He's a game manager, and he protects the ball, runs it when he needs to, and most importantly, he spends his time worrying about managing the clock. This Rutgers offense is like Iowa. Burn clock, run the ball, don't turn it over, and score just enough that you can win the game after the other team makes mistakes. I saw that they're ranking in the bottom 30 nationally in red zone scores, but that stat's deceptive. On 23 trips, they put it in the end zone 16 times, and they've only had to settle for field goals twice. Most teams ranking higher than that are scoring way less touchdowns with 3 or 4 more field goals. And I don't know how Shiano feels about his kicker, but in 4 games, they sent the field goal unit out 4 times and they've only made 2 of them. I feel like Rule and Shiano might be dealing with the same issues at kicker, so they both might be more inclined to go for it if they're in a 4th and short situation. Nebraska's D ranks 12th nationally against the run, but again, that's a deceptive ranking. They played UTEP, they played Colorado, who doesn't run it, and then Northern Iowa to boost those numbers. So we got to look at the past 2 weeks to get a better idea of how they match up with a Big Ten offense. Illinois was able to use the pass to set up the run, and they finished with 166 yards rushing and a dominant second half against a worn out D line. Purdue wanted to run it with Mockabee and Love, but they only combined for 74 yards on 23 carries, and they didn't have a run longer than 13 yards the entire game. Tony White's first Big Ten game was against Ethan Kaliak-Manis at Minnesota, and Nebraska was able to get pressure on him, forcing bad throws, sacks, and ultimately they held that offense to only 13 points. You have to respect the pass more than you did last week, but they're not as good as what Luke Altmaier and his receivers brought to the table. Nebraska can sell out to stop the run, and they can rely on their DBs to hold their own if Shiano decides to put his trust in their passing game. The Rutgers defense has been way worse than expected. They give up a ton of explosive plays through the air and on the ground. They blitz 40% of the time, and they've only got 1 sack on 140 blitzes. Their run defense gave up over 183 yards to Virginia Tech. Then against Washington, they gave up 207. The starting running backs on both of those teams averaged 8.1 and 9.3 yards a carry. The line's to blame for not getting the push up front, but their real issue's been at linebacker. They lost their #1 defender to an ACL right before the season started, and that entire unit's crumbled without him. They didn't have a single sack, a tackle for loss, or a turnover against Washington. They haven't had many game-changing plays, and if you're going to go up against a QB with multiple weapons like Raiola does, you need game-changing plays on defense so he doesn't march up and down the field the way he has these past 2 weeks. Nebraska's strength on offense has been their passing game, and although Rutgers gives up a lot of yards against the run, their secondary is a liability. 75% of the team's missed tackles are on the DBs, and against bigger body receivers who are tough to bring down, those numbers could look even worse. I'm not worried about the offense putting together long drives that get them into the red zone, but I am worried about scoring points if they don't have some explosive plays. On 22 red zone trips, they only put it in the end zone 13 times, but most of that isn't Raiola's fault. Drop balls, missed blocks, and stupid penalties have held this team back from scoring 6 touchdowns this season, and as much as I want to believe they're going to get that fixed, that's been Nebraska's identity on offense for the past 6 years. Looking at the edge, Nebraska's been more consistent with the ball in their hands, even though they've been held back in the scoring department because of all those stupid mistakes I just mentioned. They're more likely to sustain long drives, they're more likely to get into scoring position, and they can definitely take advantage of the mismatch with Rutgers' D. On defense, Illinois made them look pretty weak at times, but last week was the bounce back that we needed to see. The D-line got pressure, the linebackers made tackles to limit big runs, and the secondary was locking down the outside just like they did against Colorado. Rutgers can't even tackle, so there's no way I could consider giving them the nod here. The special teams edge goes to Rutgers, but not for what they've done these past few weeks. I saw Sean Callahan tweet a stat saying Shiano's teams have blocked 41 punts, 17 field goals, and 13 extra points. They're a team built to make plays against weaker units, and this game's going to be a prime opportunity to take advantage of a Nebraska team that lacks confidence in all of those areas. I split the coaching edge down the middle. Kirk Soraka is an experienced Big Ten OC. Shiano is one of the most respected coaches in the conference, known for doing more with less, and he just beat Brent Pry and Jed Fish, who are working with more talent than he has. I still believe Rule has one of the strongest staffs in the conference. There are just a lot of other good coaches in the Big Ten. As far as motivation goes, this game's huge for both of them. Rutgers could get to 5-0 and be a top 25 team going into their next 2 against Wisconsin and UCLA. A 5-0 start would put them in position to get to 9 or 10 wins since they've only got 2 other ranked teams on the schedule. Nebraska's still playing for bowl eligibility. Lose this week, and they're going to have to win 2 of the 4 against UCLA, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Iowa. But more than that, they're playing for pride. You can't be the home favorite and the more talented team dropping games you're supposed to win. To stay on track with this season's goals, Rule's got to get his team to execute at a high enough level to beat Rutgers. The line for this game opened at 6.5, but now it's up to 7, and part of that's because it's being played in Memorial Stadium. I saw the weather's expected to be in the mid 90s on Saturday, and with Rutgers getting blasted by the sun for the entire first half, we're going to get to see the effects of the sideline change for the first time this season. I love betting on both these teams because they're a combined 6-2 against the spread this year, but big spreads in Big Ten games usually mean one of two things. One, the line's got to be big since the matchup so clearly favors one side. Or two, one team is so hot publicly that Vegas has to give the other enough points to balance out the action. I think the Nebraska hype train slowed down a bit, and I'd actually argue that Rutgers has been picking up steam now since they're undefeated. So this line being a full touchdown tells me they think there's a significant matchup advantage here. The total says Vegas thinks this will be something like a 26-18 Nebraska victory, but the Blackshirts held Colorado to 10 points, so I don't know if Rutgers can score that many. The best Rutgers teams have a solid defense that plays fundamentally sound football, meaning they're in position to make plays, they capitalize on the offense's mistakes, and they don't miss tackles or get hit with stupid penalties. I'll go back to it again. They win when they play like Iowa, but that means they've got to be elite on special teams, and so far this season, we haven't seen that from this team. They aren't as fragile as Nebraska is in the kicking game, but they aren't good. And although they've got a running back who can eat up yards and keep Riley off the field, Nebraska's defense has playmakers at all three levels and a history holding it down against Ethan Kaliak-Manis. Can Rutgers come into Lincoln and win if we see the same Nebraska we have these past 2 weeks? Absolutely. I'd actually be slamming Rutgers +7 if you told me we'll see a performance similar to what we did against Illinois or Purdue. I just don't believe that's what we're going to get. This team's in a major growth phase with multiple new starters on both sides of the ball who are getting better as the season goes on. No, I don't expect perfection or that the minor issues all get solved in 1 week, but I do think they'll clean enough up to be a better version of what we've seen so far. To start the season 4-0 with wins over Virginia Tech and Washington means you're a good football team, but you can say the exact same thing for Nebraska. They dominated UTEP and Colorado. They played well enough to be in position to beat a top 25 Illinois in overtime. And then last week, they made plays when it mattered most to cover the spread and beat a Big Ten team by 18 points. I don't know if it'll be the defense, the running backs, or Ryla's arm that steals the show on Saturday, but I'm expecting all three to have strong showings. So I'm taking Nebraska to win 30-16, pushing them back into the top 25 right before a much needed bye week ahead of back-to-back games on the road against ranked teams. There's a fine line between a bad loss and an acceptable one, but I can tell you that even though Rutgers is an undefeated team, losing at home right before Indiana and Ohio State would be a major setback at this point in the season. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Do we see Nebraska attempt a field goal if they're in a 4th and short situation, or is Rule worried that they might block it? Is the 7-point spread a sign that Nebraska owns the matchup advantage, or do you think that's too many points? And what's your biggest concern with Rutgers? I know Monunga's a problem, but Kaliak-Manis can run, and with a mobile QB, I'm nervous they'll try to take advantage where Nebraska struggled before. But that's all I've got for today, so until next time, thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Go Big Red.